Okay, we are back once again. Thank you all for sticking around. Um, we are about to have a great conversation, or hear a great conversation between Charles Murray, the CEO of Switched Source, who I mentioned a minute ago was our last Start at ETS winner, and Evan Mahoney, who's the Vice President of Technology Services at CPS Energy. So Evan, I will turn things over to you. We're excited to hear from you guys today.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Happy to be here. Uh, Maybe just to start, Charles, I hope you're doing well. I'm sure as the winner of the 2019 started ETS, today was somewhat reflective, for you hearing a lot of our different presenters. So maybe if you can just start by spending a few minutes sharing your Switched Source founder story with the team.
Yeah, absolutely. And first I'll just say congratulations to all the people that pitched today. You all did a really terrific job. And as I recall it, pitching a couple of years ago here, incredibly stiff competition that this program pulls together, as well as some really great representation, from cities and from the utility side of things. So just a great program here overall. In terms of my background, I was an electrical engineer by training, really a born skeptic, never saw myself as an entrepreneur. But first company I went to work for out of school was a really entrepreneurial company, an organization called Invenergy, an independent power producer, doing a lot of renewable energy development, a lot of natural gas-based development. And it was there that I kind of got more comfortable with, being scrappy, developing projects, starting things from a blank sheet of paper. And when I was working at Invenergy, I was spending a decent amount of time learning about the new technologies that we were working with. I was fortunate enough to lead up the energy storage development from kind of a developer project engineer role when Invenergy first started out on that front, and was able to build out a significant portion of the fleet there in the PJM fast regulation market when that market was initially taking off. So I had been working in new technologies. I'd been working with local incubators and accelerators as sort of an advisor and mentor to all the companies that were trying to fill the various needs that energy storage created. And at that time, I came across a technology that seemed pretty promising. I was currently going around the country trying to sell energy storage to a lot of regulated utilities, and I was struggling with a couple of key things. At the time, energy storage was pretty pricey. It required a big physical footprint if you wanted to make a dent in distribution or transmission level problems. And there were some regulatory concerns too, because we weren't sure if utilities, the regulated utilities, were going to be able to own this, if it was going to be a wires asset or an energy asset. So at the time I was introduced to this technology. It was a power flow control technology. It was more of a wires asset. And as I started looking at the applications for it, it made sense to me that this device and this technology could do about 60 to 70% of what energy storage was promising to do for utility operators at about 5 to 10% of the cost. And so when that really clicked with me, that was, this huge opportunity. And, at the time, probably didn't know what I was getting into, like a lot of entrepreneurs, didn't realize the tricky road ahead. But started plugging away at working on Switched Source. And that's coming up on almost 5 years from the time I was introduced to that technology.
Great, thanks for that background, Charles, and that's impressive. Congratulations! 5 years is quite a milestone. You talk about energy storage, and even for us here at CPS Energy, I mean that's something that continues to be top of mind. It's been really interesting over the last couple of years, especially to see a lot of the evolution and really disruption, in that space of the market. Can you talk a little bit more about your products and how they're being deployed and exactly what they're measuring and supporting across the grid?
Yeah, absolutely. So our devices are really targeted at the primary distribution grid. So we're looking at that level of wood pole infrastructure that's coming out from a distribution substation. It runs 5 or 10 miles in an individual distribution circuit. From a power rating perspective, this might be about 10 megawatts of power. From a customer perspective, it could be anywhere from 500 to a few thousand customers on an individual distribution circuit. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to tackle kind of that next generation of problems associated with how do you increase the reliability and resiliency of the grid beyond just using switches and automated switches? How do you increase the distributed generation hosting capacity of the grid without just resorting to energy storage, where you're going to store something and then kind of bring it back later in the day? You might lose 20% of the energy you put into that battery when you try to take it back out again. And also, ideas around upgrade deferrals, which is a kind of an area that I think a lot of technologies look at for low-hanging fruit because the economics can be pretty sweet. So our devices are really just internet routers, but for power for the distribution grid. So these are power electronics technologies that can be used to intelligently route power from distribution circuit to distribution circuit or across the three phases of an individual distribution circuit. So those are the core two technologies that we're working with right now.
Great. Yeah. Thank you for that. You know, a lot of, I'm sure the organizations you're talking to have probably a somewhat complex technology ecosystem in place today across their grid, right? Especially as we see more and more of, distributed generation and additional, edge devices being deployed to measure different aspects of, of the grid. How does your solution work with, your customers' environments and integrate to really provide them with a single pane of glass in conjunction with all the other technologies that they're managing, in their environment?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. And I wish that there was kind of a catch-all answer, in terms of, how we tackle that problem, but it really is on a customer by customer basis. And part of the reason that it's on a customer by customer basis is because I think there really hasn't been that consensus achieved today of how to deal with these upcoming problems. So we try to kind of split our devices into applications that we think are immediate need and make sure that we understand what those immediate need pain points are for the utility. Understanding the integration of our device to solve those types of problems is usually a little bit easier because we're talking about rifle shots. We're talking about how one or two devices, maybe it goes up to 3 to 5 devices, can tackle a specific problem. How you can eliminate or defer the upgrade of a substation in an area where it might be very costly. It might cost you $10 or $15 million. Those sorts of opportunities are things that we can kind of create engineered solutions for. But when you're talking about utilities that are more interested in system-wide rollouts, looking at hundreds of devices, and again, from a utility perspective, kind of run-of-the-mill utility, probably operating somewhere in between 750 and 1,000 distribution circuits. I would say the largest 100 utilities are operating somewhere north of 750 circuits, up to 4,000 circuits. It becomes a really, really complex problem, to your point, Evan. And a lot of these utilities are kind of in the midst of deploying their own enterprise level software solutions, DMS, ADMS type solutions. So it does become tricky there. But for us, the size that we're at, the way that we are really trying to decrease that friction of the initial sales is not necessarily around the integration yet. It's not necessarily how we do that great handshake when we deploy 100 of these. It's how do we decrease the engineering lift to understand the value of our equipment. And so we've been spending lots and lots of time creating tools for utilities so that they can drop in our device to the power system simulation that they're already running for distribution planning or for an interconnection planning study, and be able to see how our device could interact with a solar facility. So that is kind of step one, is how do you decrease that friction so it's a little bit easier for the utilities to understand where and how they would use your technology.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great approach, Charles, to really hone in on a particular, use case and try to get, it in the environment so people can see, the value and then figure out, the best way to scale from there. So appreciate you sharing that. So, this year, I think, as we all know, has presented a lot of challenges for every organization. I'm CPS Energy is in South Texas, and one of the things that we're constantly reminded of is that change is fluid these days, and we managed through COVID. We recently had a winter storm, and all of those things bring challenges. But maybe for you, Charles, as a startup, talk a little bit about maybe some of the challenges that you faced, or maybe some of the silver lining that you've seen, as part of the last year for your organization and working through COVID.
Yeah, I would say, we didn't really see a slowdown on the customer front as much as we probably expected. So when, COVID, first really hit in full force and we were seeing a lot of stay-at-home orders, we actually heard a lot of utilities were trying to get out in the field and do as much maintenance and construction work as possible because there was less cars on the road. So we knew that for the utilities, there was kind of a lack of sort of like headquarters, center of mass. There weren't 15 people working in an office space together, but in terms of the operations, it seemed like it was still business as usual for the most part. And that was helpful for us because we still needed to move a lot of our projects forward. And I think that what we felt from the utilities was, the utility time constant for sales, for project planning, is relatively long, and that COVID wasn't the sort of thing where we were going to slam on the brakes. So that was like a really good piece of feedback that we got from the utilities that we were working with. Wasn't hey, well, let's wait and see what happens with COVID before we take the next steps with this thing. A lot of those conversations were able to progress. And one of the best parts about the way that they were able to progress was now everybody was forced to work through Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whatever it may be. There's a little bit of a kerfuffle there with which one of these platforms is the most cyber secure, and so some scares around that. But eventually, what this has led to is much easier, much more frequent touch points with utilities and with our customers. It still doesn't match the sort of interaction that we get when we're standing in front of a whiteboard together, trying to actively solve problems as a team. That's where we do our best work and kind of where we see the most magic happen when we're working with utilities. But it's certainly been a blessing in disguise to see utilities get a lot more comfortable with the virtual meetings, and us be able to kind of increase that number and frequency of touch points.
Yeah. I think, it's been an adjustment for all. I know as our organization is, started slowly coming back into the office, one of the things you touched on is so true. The power of, ad hoc dialogue and getting people in a room and just being able to collaborate is something that looks a little bit different when it happens organically. So I can definitely relate to you there. I think as we heard today, a lot of the organizations that spoke have, different types of solutions that speak to some of the different challenges that, both from a smart city perspective and on the utility side are encountering. But I've seen during my time with CPS Energy, our business model is often being challenged and changing. So can you talk a little bit about maybe how your business model has changed from where you started, 5 years ago, and how do you feel you've had to pivot based on, changes that have been occurring in the industry?
Yeah, and I mean, I would say that we kind of started off on this journey knowing that we picked a hard thing to do, and there was a certain amount of resiliency that we wanted to build into the company. And I'm probably not saying anything that's news to the companies that are on the line here, because they have all picked a very challenging industry to work in. I mean, just even B2B, but B2B when you're talking about selling to cities or selling to utilities, it's very long sales cycles. And what we saw kind of at the outset was that it was very difficult to use a lot of the early stage capitalization, private capital that was available, and kind of make the numbers work because of that time constant that's associated with the sales cycle. It's associated with the product development cycles. And so, to put it pretty succinctly, I heard somebody speak recently about entrepreneurship, and they said that the CEO's job was to make sure the company doesn't run out of money before you get product market fit. And that's throwing kind of some MBA jargon at it maybe, but it really is this critical point: is you have to build a resilient organization. You have to understand what those time constants are associated with sales cycles. You have to understand how much money you're going to need, and you're going to have to understand exactly what product specifications your customers are going to be able to accept. because, again, in the utility space, expectations, even for that first unit that goes in the field, are really high. And with high expectations comes a lot of sunk costs. So, it's a constant balancing act. And I think that that's, one of the reasons that we've been able to, last as long as we have, is because along that entire time period, we knew that we had to be incredibly scrappy. We knew that we had to, fight for dollars and cents wherever we could get them to move the product to get above that sort of bar so that we can get to commercial sales.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. One of the things that I know we hear a lot about in the industry and a number of organizations, CPS Energy included, is, really thinking about how digital transformation can, help our organization evolve, right? And we do that through a lot of different ways: visibility and access to data, or deployment of new technology solutions, or, how are we, better engaging with our customers? How do you, Switch Source, and maybe other similar providers, how do you feel like you're helping ensure reliability and supporting this idea of more rapid deployment of digital transformation initiatives?
Yeah, I think we hear the digital transformation a lot, and there's kind of this sort of counterintuitive idea that we have, which is, right now, from a grid operation perspective, a lot of the devices that are out there are somewhat binary, which makes me think digital. So there's a lot of switches, which you can have in one of two positions, open and closed. And that's really the way that the grid has been managed up to date. So you're having something that is more flexible, that can respond better to more dynamic digital commands. I think those tool sets, and energy storage is in this category as well. The ability to curtail distributed generation is something that I think would also potentially fall into this category. But that digital transformation is critical, in that software layer, to be able to take in that information and make decisions. But you still need a lot of the hardware out there to be able to have that sort of flexible, dynamic, intelligent impact on the grid. So we're big believers that there's a lot that digital transformation can bring to the table in terms of software, in terms of understanding what's happening on the grid. But there is a core limitation. If you're really just working with a finite set of tools that are binary devices, or very limited in terms of how frequently you can even use them, because a lot of these are mechanical devices and take wear and tear. There's going to need to be some tools to be able to support and get the full benefit out of that digital transformation.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And one of the things that we often reflect on, as an organization, is balancing, what we're trying to accomplish, and not deploying an ecosystem that becomes so much more complex because we've got all these new technologies that are in place. So so definitely a good point there. So you talked about, Charles, a little bit of your journey early on, and you're 5 years in. What are the plans for Switch Source moving forward? What's on the roadmap for you all?
Yeah, so we've been incredibly fortunate. We recently were awarded a sort of follow-on grant from the Department of Energy through ARPA-E. ARPA-E is this advanced research projects agency within the Department of Energy. They do a lot of terrific work funding sort of kind of basic research to get ideas off the page that you normally can't. It's difficult to get that early stage funding. And so more recently, ARPA-E is kind of growing into later stage support. They're trying to fill gaps with technologies that just need more capital to come in before the private capital markets are really interested and excited about them. And so they gave us an award for some follow-on support here. It's going to help us do a number of demonstration projects. We're going to do some demonstration projects focused on solar integration, focused on upgrade deferrals, and then focused on the reliability and resiliency of the grid. And so we are still kind of moving dance partners around. So just a little plug for the utilities that are on the line here. If you are interested in potentially working with us on one of these demonstration projects, please do reach out. We are still filling up our line card there.
Great. That's awesome to hear, and congratulations, Charlie. Sounds like exciting times for you and Switch Source. And again, looking back on a year ago and started ETS, definitely exciting to hear your story and learn more about how your organization is thinking about a lot of the challenges that we're facing. So very much appreciate you joining us again today and sharing your insight. And again, congratulations on your continued success.
Thanks, Evan. Appreciate it.
Yep, of course. Back to you, Aaron.
Thank you, guys. Great conversation. Thank you for sharing. And it's great to hear what you're up to now, Charlie.